it's very well documented across a wide range of sources. British involvement in loyalist death squads, and if that isn't terrorism, I don't know what is.
What would your argument be against those who would label you a terrorist or former?
To me, terrorism is a form of political abuse. It's a term of political abuse. If you support somebody, they're a freedom fighter. If you don't, they're a terrorist. Now, there are acts of terror. There's no question that deliberately killing innocent civilians is an act of terror. I have no doubt about that. Now, the IRA, like armies around the world, I don't know any army in history that hasn't accidentally killed civilians. And the IRA, there were a small number of cases where innocent civilians were killed. But it was never a matter of policy. It's inexcusable. It's morally and politically wrong, but it was never done as policy to kill innocent civilians. I would not have joined an organization who deliberately killed innocent civilians as a matter of policy. I simply would have known. Like I'm an Irish Republican. I'm a patriot. I would not have done that. But it did happen. It did happen, unfortunately, and sometimes it happened due to lack of intelligence, poor tradecraft, lack of attention to detail, and other times it happened where the dark hand of British intelligence was involved in tampering with devices and also recruiting IRA people as agents. I think that might come out in the next couple of years, a bit more information on that. But to answer your question, on the whole, the term terrorism is simply a term of political abuse. And, one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. It's a cliche, but it's quite true. I personally was never involved in an operation that killed innocent civilians. The vast majority of IRA volunteers were never involved in an operation where civilians were killed, the vast majority. And I would not accept that label as, I would look on as patriots who are fighting for the freedom of our country against, and the British. I mean, the hypocrisy of the British is instead of doing, the killings themselves, they got the loyalists to do it for them, and they became firm believer in Sun Tzu's dictum, always kill with a borrowed knife. They supplied loyalists with weapons from South Africa in 1987, Warsaw Pact at the time weapons that would, distance the British state from, culpability in these killings and all. So, it's a bit maybe complicated to go into now in a podcast, but it's well documented. It's very well documented across a wide range of sources. British involvement in loyalist death squads, and if that isn't terrorism, I don't know what is.
Yeah, even I mean what was it called, the Miami show band massacre. They gave them uniforms even.
Yeah. They gave them uniforms, and the Dublin Monaghan bombings, which are almost written out of history. Very deliberately targeting civilians. Now, I know, loyalists and Brits like to say, oh, the IRA killed civilians too, and it was deliberate. It was never deliberate. There was never ever a case that I could think of. I can't imagine, where it was deliberately done. An example could be when there was no mobile phones, a bomb might be placed somewhere, and the volunteers wouldn't realize when they're calling in the warning that the 3 public phone boxes in a row have been vandalized or broken. By the time they get to the 4th, it's too late. Now, it's not an excuse. You can't. It's not. It's it's no comfort to the families of those who lost loved ones, and I can totally empathize with that. But it wasn't deliberately. It wasn't deliberately done. Now, I know that's no. I mean, look, if somebody killed a relative of mine and told me it wasn't deliberate, that would give me no comfort. In fact, it'd probably add insult to injury. But to answer, the cold hard facts is the IRA did not, as a matter of policy, target innocent civilians. Whereas the British did through the loyalists, and yet we're supposed to be the terrorists and they're supposed to be the good guys. But the winners write the history, so that's the trouble.
Funny, actually, I only ever found out about that bomb in Dublin literally a couple of years ago. Never through history class. Never documentaries and nothing like that. I discovered it a few years ago. My stepfather told me, like in the shed when I was home. I didn't believe him.
34 people killed in Dublin Monaghan in deliberately no warning bombs, and it It was done in May 74 during the Ulster Loyalist Workers' Strike. And it was done unquestionably with the help of British military intelligence and IRC Special Branch. And the Irish government panicked that people would turn against the British, and actually started pointing the finger of blame at the IRA, and came up with statements at the time saying if the IRA weren't fighting, this wouldn't have happened. You know, even though it was loyalists who initiated the bombing and shooting campaign when nationalists went up for civil rights. So a lot of people forget that. And within 3 months of the Dublin Monaghan bombing, the Garda team tasked with its investigation were disbanded. Now, the Irish government knows that the British were behind that, and they want to just completely sweep that under the carpet because they can't handle the implications of that. They just simply don't want to know, you know. And terrible time, you know. But again, you know, terrorist freedom fighter, you know, it depends on your perspective. I do agree, though, that the deliberate killing of innocent civilians is a terrorist act. There's no question about that. But I would totally be against anything like that.